Well, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Welcome to our Sangha. I invite you just to take a moment and let yourself fully be here, feeling the energy of this wonderful place, this wonderful group. We all come here for the purpose of awakening. That's very powerful when we get 100, 200 people to come together for an hour to hold that intention of awakening for ourselves, for each other, and for everyone on this planet. So thank you for being here. Today I want to talk about the knowledge of good and evil. Today in our world, as you know, there's a great deal of polarization. People are not just disagreeing with one another, but they see those with different points of view as evil. And this is very dangerous, because in our culture we see evil as something to be eradicated, destroyed, eliminated. And people that are evil, as we call them, they should be eliminated and destroyed by that same logic, you say. So that concept of evil is a very dangerous one. And so I want to look at this phenomenon of good and evil, to explore just what that is and what that means. I'm going to look at it from two very different perspectives. One is from the perspective of our Judeo-Christian heritage. The other is from the perspective of Buddhist psychology. So we're looking at the concept of good and evil from two very different places. Both are relevant to us today because we are both part of the Buddhist tradition and we are part of the world as it is today. So, back to the beginning. In the beginning, God created Adam and Eve. You may or may not be familiar with that story. It's a story that a few people take literally. Not very many, but there's a few. A lot of people just dismiss it entirely as nonsense. Pay no attention to it, give it no credence. And I think that both of those approaches are not healthy, not good. It's not healthy to dismiss it as nonsense, because it's not. And it's not healthy to believe it is literally true, because it's not. Story, as a story, it's a myth. It's a myth. It's part of our culture for a long time. And the myth is a story that, taken literally, makes no sense whatever. It's filled with nonsense. And yet, when taken symbolically, it can contain a great deal of wisdom. We could say that a myth makes no sense, whatever. and yet it's filled with wisdom. Much wisdom makes no sense. So because something makes sense, it doesn't mean that it's true. And because it doesn't make sense doesn't mean that it's not true. It could be said that a myth never occurred, and yet it's always occurring. It's always happening. So let's talk about the story of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. Some of you know it very well. Some of you may not be familiar with it. But once upon a time, there were two people known as Adam. Adam is actually the Hebrew word for human. Adam and Eve. They lived in this garden. Must have been a really cool place. Everything was just perfect. Everything was just perfect. Had all the food you wanted to eat. Didn't even have to wear clothes. Always comfortable temperature. Everything you need is right at your fingertips. There's no suffering, no lack, there's no struggle. Everything is perfect. However, God said to Adam and Eve, you're welcome to live here as long as you want. But there's one thing you can't do. See that tree over there? That's what I call the tree of good and evil, tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You can have the fruit from any of these trees, hundreds, maybe thousands of trees, but not that one. Okay? So they lived for quite a while, managing to avoid the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But one day, as Eve was walking in the garden, she heard something. Psst. 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 There was a little serpent crawling around. And the serpent was not evil, it was not poisonous, it was not bad. But it spoke to her. It said, you know something? That tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you can eat of that and you won't die, like God said. In fact, if you eat of that tree, your eyes will be opened. You'll be just like God. You'll know good and evil. So, when Adam saw that the fruit of the tree, I'm reading this right out of the story, out of the Bible, Genesis chapter 2, if you wanted to look it up. In case you brought your Bible with you, you can. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree, the knowledge of good and evil, was good for food, pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for getting wisdom. She took some and ate it. Then she gave it to her husband, Adam, and he ate it too. And the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew good and evil. That's the good news. Bad news is they were kicked out of the garden. The Lord expelled them from the garden, told them that for the rest of their life they would suffer. They would have to toil for the food that they ate. They would get sick and they would die. However, their eyes were opened. They knew good and evil. So I believe that it was not a punishment in which God kicked them out of the garden. It wasn't punishment, which we typically are taught, maybe in Sunday school. But they were expelled from the Garden of Eden because they outgrew it. Once you know good and evil, you can't be there anymore. You can no longer live in innocence once you know good and evil. And I think we all have had that experience of, when we're very young, we live in the Garden of Eden. That's why we love, or I'll speak for myself, I love to be with young children because they're in the garden, right? Children 3, 4 years old. That is children that have not been hurt, abused, or mistreated. Most of them are in the garden. Life is good. They just love life and have fun. And at one time, perhaps our race was like that before we humans gained the ability to discern good and evil, before we had this vision of being a separate being. We lived in the garden. We lived with nature. You see, nature really is the garden. Because in nature, there's no good and evil. In nature, there's nothing but abundance. But in the world of humans, there's lack, limitation, there's good, and there's evil. Why is that? Why did we leave the garden? Not just got kicked out of it, we left the garden. Well, many years later, a man named Siddhartha Gautama looked around and said, life is suffering. That was just a statement. He didn't make reference to the Garden of Eden. But he saw that people, humans, were unhappy. They lived in a way that kept them from being happy. He didn't see them as victims of God's punishing them. He didn't see them as living out some guilt or some punishment for eating a fictitious fruit. He saw that evil, suffering, dukkha, was a result of the way we live our life, specifically the way we live our life internally. So he explored how we live our life. He explored great detail how we, in a sense, create our reality and thus create our suffering, our good or evil as may be. I'm going to depict at this time the Buddhist teaching as portrayed in a psychological principle known as dependent origination. It's long, it's complicated. I'll try to simplify it. But he talks about how we literally create our beingness, how we create our reality, how we create this experience of being alive as we are right now. He talks about the first step being sensory awareness. In other words, the eye sees, the ear hears, the body feels, the tongue tastes. We don't have to do anything for that to happen. You don't have to do anything to see other than open your eyes. Right? No efforting needed. Nothing to do to hear. Don't even have to open our ears. We just hear, right? And same way with touch, taste. All we need to do is allow it to happen. It happens naturally. So with sensory awareness, a discernment process takes place known as perception. You can think of perception as recognition. We hear a sound, we recognize the sound. We see a sight, we recognize the sight. What we don't recognize, we tend to filter out. Or what's not relevant, we tend to filter out. So perception is recognizing what we're seeing or hearing. You know, sometimes when we look at an abstract painting, there's the eye sees, right? The eye sees an object, but it's not quite sure what it sees. There's no perception. There's no recognition. I say perception is when I know what I'm seeing. I recognize what I'm seeing. I perceive it. Then there's a feeling tone. The feeling tone is a tone in the mind that's either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. If it's pleasant, we may react to it a certain way. And often we react to it through craving. I want more of it. We taste something that tastes good. We want to eat another bite right away. Or we taste something that's really yucky and it's really bad. We spit it out. So there's a response to perception. Aversion if we don't like it. Craving more if we do like it. And then from that craving or aversion comes a concept of a thing. And from that concept then comes language. And so we construct language, and thus from language we construct our sense of reality. Because our sense of reality is based upon language to a great deal. Because when you look at something, you typically think about it. And we think about it in words. Words are pictures, but usually in words. So language becomes part of our reality. So evil is a concept. Good is a concept. So good and evil have a particular feeling quality, feeling tone connected with it. Evil has a very distasteful quality connected with it. And what we call good has a very pleasant, likable feeling tone connected with it. So if we take a look, maybe we can put, Eric, we can put that up on the screen now, if you would. He's ahead of me, you already have. Sensory awareness, perception, feeling, tone, craving, concept, and then story, language story. Let's go back to the Garden of Eden. The first two came from the serpent. The serpent was aware, could perceive. It talked to Eve, and Eve was the feeling tone. Eve saw that the fruit was pleasant to the eye. It was good to eat. And it was desirable for wisdom. Now, all of the other trees were good to eat. Fruit was good to eat. Was good for food, tasty, pleasant. But only one tree she perceived as being desirable for knowledge, for wisdom. So that craving for wisdom made Eve eat the fruit. So what sense awareness is the attempt to gain wisdom through sensory experience. And that's really the crux of this story here, the so-called fall of man, fall of woman, is when we engage the senses and we believe the senses were real. We believe the senses would give us wisdom. We believe that what was pleasant was good. What was unpleasant was evil. And that's the deadly association right there. So the way to break the cycle of creating evil in our own mind, or any concept for that matter, is to be aware of the quality of Vedana, which is either pleasantness or unpleasantness. And if we can stop there and simply recognize unpleasant doesn't mean evil. Unpleasant doesn't mean bad. Unpleasant doesn't mean it's wrong. simply means unpleasant. And the same way with pleasantness. Pleasant doesn't mean good, desirable, etc., etc. We have equated the concept of good and evil with the flavor, if you will, with the taste of good, pleasant and unpleasant. You know, if you look at a little child, give something, medicine, to a child, the medicine is evil. But to mom, it's good. See, because to mom, it's going to heal the child and it's going to be pleasant in the long run, right? It's good in the long run. But to the child, it's just pure evil. And I'm doing it only because mom is making me do it. So we label things as good and evil. Of course, that's Adam's job. Adam creates concepts. Adam creates names. It was Adam that named all the animals. And by the way, Adam and Eve got really nothing to do with male and female as we know it. Adam is simply the concepting, languaging part of ourselves, the rational brain. Eve is the feeling sense of our consciousness. So here's a way to eliminate evil. I got to do it quickly. Try this experiment sometime. Listen to someone you really don't like. Listen to someone, television, YouTube, whatever you see. Just close your eyes and listen to it. As you do, feel the feeling quality connected with it. It's not easy, but just let yourself feel it without responding, without conceptualizing, without acting. Just let yourself feel it. And it may feel like you're being stuck with 1,000 needles, or it may feel like your skin's being peeled off. But if you can be with it, that you can still have the discernment that this is true and this is not true. This is good, this is not good. But you don't go to the conceptualization of evil. And that's where the problem begins. Because everybody's fighting good and evil. Everyone on this planet is fighting evil. Only evil is always the other person, right? So that's because we cannot be with this experience of unpleasantness and just let it be that. What's important, however, is that this happens so quickly that it takes practice to be present to the body, to create the sharpened awareness to be fully present to this, so that we can not act out by labeling evil. Because when we hear someone and this touches this place in us, we want to respond by arguing, by condemning, by whatever you say. But if I can just be, okay, I don't like this, it's difficult. Don't worry about the words, just feel it in the body. It may seem like some little thing, but you're in the process of destroying evil when you do that. Very powerful. I invite you to try that process several times. Yeah, it's a great practice. So I want to close with a quote from Rumi. Rumi says, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing is a field. I will meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about it. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other don't make any sense. So that's the place to rest. The field beyond good and evil is that ability to simply be with our feelings without concepting, without creating thought, language, or acting it out. So I will stop at this point. I'm on overtime already. And some of you may be having difficult feelings. So just be with it if you are. And thank you for your practice.